Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
We are. I'm here in Knoxville, and we'll see if anybody comes in person. I left it open in case people do. We'll. Beverly's going to potentially let people in over the next 15 minutes if anybody comes. And but happy to have it on Zoom regardless. And welcome back. Glad to have you. Um, I'm pretty sure that at least this month, next month, and March, um, we're going to be on a pretty good every other week way. It might not last the entire time. It might not that might not hold necessarily, but we're going to. I try to do it when I can. My goal is to do this class twice a month. So sometimes it's tough to do that without doing consecutive weeks or skipping around or skipping a little bit, but we do our best. So thank you for your continued patience. We are on a psalm that you probably, well, I mean, I shouldn't say probably, but my guess is that if you've attended services on Saturday mornings, this is going to come to you pretty quick. And it'll be nice to be able to really examine it as we do this, because again, it's nice and I think familiar to a lot of you. So let me get into the website here. Let me make sure I'm spelling Safaria correctly. Okay. So let's see. We are at Tanakh. We are in Psalms. This is Psalm 29. Okay. Let's see. Why did this do this? Okay. Okay, yes, currently selected. Good. Um, let's adjust it a little bit so that everybody can see hopefully well. And okay. So, for those who are familiar with the Hebrew, I present to you Psalm 29, which starts Mizmor LeDavid Havu Ladai. All right. So, in case,
We know this one.
Yes, we do.
a lot of you do. But in case there is somebody online or on YouTube who doesn't necessarily know, what are we talking about here? This is the psalm that we sing when we are returning the Torah scroll or scrolls to the Ark on a Shabbat morning, on a Saturday morning. And this is one of those psalms that is familiar to many a student, um, partially because uh, there are numerous people who celebrate their bar mitzvah and learn to lead this particular passage. Um, it's one of the it has with it one of the more recognizable tunes that we have among the different prayers, and um, there's also a lot of repetition of words, which I think probably helps in the case of learning it. Like we're going to get to a number of words besides, of course, the name of God, but there's a bit of repetition here, which, as I believe we've talked about from time to time, is really done for the sake of poetic effect and not necessarily to indicate that there is a different meaning for each time a word is recited. We are so used to the idea that, oh, well, if this word was written twice, it must mean that it's really, really important or that it means something different but sometimes it's just there for the rhythm and the poetry. So that's something to keep in mind there. So if you attend Shabbat services, you've sung this or at least parts of this a bunch of times, and it also helps that it has a very, I think, very peppy tune. It's very it's kind of a happy one. So uh, one thing to think about is the fact that we have 150 songs. There are some that are definitely not really made for liturgy, that are not really the best to put in a prayer book and to have everybody sing along. This is one of those where, yeah, it's kind of custom made, if you will, or at least it feels like it. So it's so I hopefully this will be fun. Um, so regarding the start of it, let's see. Richard, would you do 1, 2, and 3 for us? What hopefully is on the screen?
Sorry, I'm muted. I said,
Okay.
do you want it in English or in Hebrew?
Yeah, English would be great. I mean, if you
That's
want,
because that's all you're going to
that's
get.
totally fine. Totally fine.
Okay, a Psalm of David. Ascribe to God, O divine beings, ascribe to God glory and strength. Ascribe to God the glory of that name. Bow down to God, majestic in holiness.
Yeah, there should be a little more. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, and the three, God's
Yeah.
voice is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. God over the mighty waters.
Okay. Okay. So you see that, look, this is not what you would call concise, right? This is flowery. It's if you were to if somebody were to be really strict about word count, you'd probably compress it and it would mean the same thing. But again, the idea is to make it kind of flowery and and just to kind of enjoy and as we like to say that rock and roll is the is repetition without monotony. And so too with anything that's in our liturgy. Um,
Well,
what?
one thing,
Yeah,
well, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but I mean,
please.
one thing strikes me here that it is addressed to the B'nai Elim.
Right, right. And I mean, I think we're going to get into that. We are. I mean, yeah, we'll definitely. I mean, let me see, to see what Alter has on that. Not that he's the only source, but oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
He's
and then, I mean, in verse 3, I think it clearly sort of echoes Genesis 1.
no question, no question. I mean, this is very much with there's creation typology all over this. And yeah, Alter's got a lot to say about oh divine beings, the B'nai Elim, which is, well, it's translated as divine beings. If you're going to be literal about it, it literally B'nai Elim means oh sons of God or sons of gods. Whoa, okay, hold on a second here. What does this mean? We'll get into that in a moment. I do like to um, I've always wanted to do this when leading this, but I'm afraid this particular method of chanting this would probably go over a lot of people's heads. But I think it is timely to mention, given the a very important sporting event that is happening soon. And in this case, I'm not referring to the Super Bowl. I'm referring to the Winter Olympics. The Winter Olympics and the Super Bowl actually coincide this year. And so, when we think of the Olympic theme, we think da 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 da, right? One of those classic John Williams compositions. But John Williams actually wrote a composition that became the theme for one Olympics that I'm aware of, and these were the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea. I remember this because I was 11 years old when this happened. And sometimes there are things that you remember at that age that just kind of stick with you for a long time. And they decided to use a different theme for that. The NBC, which broadcasted, decided to use not the typical da 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 da. They used a different John Williams uh, composition called "The Olympic Spirit," and uh, it's absolutely wonderful if you ever wanted to look it up. It's bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum ba da dum bum 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 da 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 da. It's absolutely breathtaking, and what they continue, and then like a theme that they use in it, or at least a little part that they use, is da 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 dum da 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 dum, and I always like that little part. And so you have, when we chant Psalm 29, when we chant this psalm, and when we start the march around the sanctuary with the Torah scrolls, it always begins with the leader singing Mizmor David. And I always wanted to lead it in citing that little Olympic spirit thing, Mizmor David. I don't think anybody would get it besides now you, but I've just always loved that. So again, it's called the Olympic Spirit. John Williams. If you ever want to listen to it, it's lovely. Okay, so all right, so let's go right into this very meaty thing. B'nai Elim, literally sons of God or sons of God. Um, Robert Alter translates this as "O sons of God," and begins his commentary by saying, "This is the first clue of many that have led a whole line of scholars to see this psalm as a translation or close adaptation of a Canaanite psalm. It has been variously claimed that in the original text it was Baal as thunder god, not Yahweh, who imposed his fearsome voice over the whole world. None of these arguments is entirely convincing," Alter continues. "Although there are parallels to certain wordings here in Ugaritic poetry, that scarcely proves that this poem is a translation. The same is true of the proposed linguistic and prosodic evidence that has been put forth to support the same claim. Canaanite poetry was the literary tradition that constituted the most immediate background for biblical poetry. It would not be surprising if the biblical poets did not make use of images, phrasing, and even mythological elements from the antecedent tradition with which they and their audience were acquainted. The relation of this psalm and a good many others to the Syro-Palestinian tradition is roughly like that of Paradise Lost to the Aeneid and the Iliad. Virgil and Homer gave Milton a model and a repertory of devices and topoi with which he could frame a cosmic epic from his own monotheistic perspective, but he was not merely transposing the pagan epic poets into English. Okay, there's a lot in there. To summarize, what he's saying is that it's not is that Alter is claiming that, to the best of his knowledge, this is not a Canaanite psalm that was like tinkered a little bit to make it a Jewish psalm. This was, however, a popular psalm of the overall ancient Near Eastern culture, which most likely the Hebrew psalmist used as background and inspiration to write his or her own psalm. It is an echo of a Canaanite psalm, not a strict adaptation. That is Alter's argument. To go into whether or not that argument stands up would require, I think, research that is above my pay grade. So I can't, confirm nor deny. But I think his argument is certainly plausible. When we think of adaptations that were inspired by other artistic adaptations that were based on other works of art or adapted from other works of art, there was an inspiration, but not a template to be simply copied. You may be familiar with a very charming film by the Coen brothers known as "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Yeah.
A lot of you have seen it. Very fun movie. The "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" was, according to the Coen brothers, adapted from the Odyssey. Although the Coen brothers acknowledged in interviews that neither of them had actually ever read the Odyssey.
Hmm.
um, which I find simultaneously hysterical and also kind of proving the point that we're making. In other words, they weren't trying to, uh, go line by line, chapter by chapter, and do this sort of recreation into a different time period and different setting, but rather they were taking popular elements, stuff that people kind of know about the Odyssey if they are familiar with the culture, and kind of working from there, right? In other words, when we think of what comes from the Odyssey that is in popular culture, you think of the Odysseus's journey to go to, it was Helen, I believe, right? Um, the story of seeing the Cyclops, of encountering the Cyclops and things like that. Those are things that they kind of throw into this movie, but uh, but again, this is not a based on a novel or based on a true story. This is inspired by it. So it's the same sort of thing. So lest we assume that we were just taking a Canaanite psalm and just pasting the word God over it, where you usually would have the word Baal. Um, no, it's probably more original than that. Any questions or comments about this idea?
So again, I mean, um, even if we cannot uh, uh, at this time, and certainly us with our knowledge, determine which of these interpretations and understandings of the origin of the psalm is true, whether it's been um, in the general theme of these Canaanite psalms or just a straight adaptation of one. What is I mean, very obvious is that there was a cultural exchange, and uh, the Israelite culture did not develop in a vacuum, but in exchange with their environment and with their surrounding cultures.
No question. And so this is a classic example of syncretism.
I
Uh,
like your
yeah.
interpretation better if I understood you correctly. You said that first line was saying, "Oh, sons of God." I like that interpretation a lot better. It's like the Shema is telling you to do something, not
Hmm.
just talking about somebody, often whoever, angels or whoever. It's talking about us, talking to us.
Yeah, yeah. Let's start. Go ahead, Marcus.
I mean, the Hebrew really with the B'nai Elim, I mean, certainly the form, the Elim is much more suggestive, I would say, of oh, angels or other divine beings.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Altar refers to them as God's royal entourage on high,
I
or
mean, the
God's,
divine counsel that we see in
yeah.
other Psalms and places as well. So,
You have this idea. I mean, and and bringing in the creation typology of it all. Um, there's actually in Genesis chapter 1, there is this absolutely striking passage where God says on the sixth day, after all the other animals had been created, God says, "Let us make man." Whoa, wait, us? There are other people around? There are other, not necessarily people, but there are other beings around to, helping God do the creation. We thought it's like, okay, God speaks and it is so. What do you mean that that God's got a committee? But essentially,
What
that's
happened?
what's being applied. I'm sorry.
Is that what happened to us? God had a committee.
Yeah, yeah. It's like we've been created by committee, hence all the chaos. No.
But
Uh,
if we don't look at B'nai Elim, but only at Elim, it can also mean a dreamlike oasis in the wilderness, which is like completely different from angels, you
Right.
know. So, but never, it still connects because if it's like some what's the word? Some lofty place that is mysterious. It still is, an environment where quote angels could exist.
Right, right. And and here and taking a little bit more from Alter's comment on this, they, meaning the B'nai Elim, are best thought of as the flickering literary afterlife of a polytheistic mythology.
Wow.
So, okay,
So mine says,
yeah,
ascribe unto the Lord, O ye sons of might.
Sons of Might, interesting. And whether that's meant to sort of be sort of a code for other divine beings, whether, in other words, that sons of might meaning, okay, these are the majestic, like referring to the majestic quality of such beings. In other words, maybe they're sort of dancing around the question of what are they exactly? Are they divine or otherwise? But yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting interpretation.
How is there so many different translations of the Hebrew? There was your version, and there was other people's got different things of what they're addressing there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
probably
yeah,
because there's B'nai Elim, sons of gods or of God, is problematic theologically. I mean, you might feel a bit uncomfortable. So that is why I think translators uh, have struggled with how to render it. I mean, there is I mean, translation is interpretation.
Right.
yeah,
And if there indeed is a connection to the Canaanite culture, they were in monotheistic. So Elim, using Elim as a plural would work.
sure,
Right.
sure.
I mean, but we are, it's not co-ed exactly, but there's plenty of places that addresses this as being sons of God, and I don't have any problem that he created the animals before us, and maybe he created angels or whatever before us too. We don't have to be his first creation. So I don't understand why there's so many. I mean, my Hebrew was zilch, but I have learned some German when I was in Germany, and there were not like 50 different translations for the same words. I don't. That's why I get a little confused on the difference in the translation.
Oh, that the thing is that Elim is certainly grammatically a plural. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, right, like sons
so
of.
the plural is it's the plural form of El. Uh,
Yeah,
so
right.
it's different from it's actually it's different etymologically also from Elohim,
Uh-huh.
which we use usually use as God referring to our God.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's when you think about it, it's kind of a wild, what a wild idea that um, uh, here Judaism is the oldest surviving monotheistic tradition, and yet we have this prominent name for God, Elohim, that looks to be plural. It's just kind of an ironic thing. Uh, so so it's true. Again, one of my professors would always say that that his argument was don't get hung up so much on plural versus singular in a lot of cases, that they were kind of used interchangeably in a way that wasn't necessarily meant to be taken absolutely literally all the time.
Rabbi,
Yeah, please.
well, this may have been in our discussion before services on last Shabbos. We were talking about the different, how each, well, we say God of Abraham, God of Jacob, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, and that some people say that's a different relationship. Some other people, other scholars say it's a um, a develop as God has developed over time. I'm thinking that based on what you were saying about this being back with having a connection to earlier cultures, civilizations, that we also were evolving at the same time that God may be evolving.
Hmm, very interesting. Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, it's, but indeed, right? I mean, as I believe, Marcus, you said, the idea that we did not that we didn't develop in a bubble, or in a vacuum, I think was the word you used. And so, yeah, so our understanding of what God is develops, and and as in some cases appear, these viewpoints or understandings of God, they vacillate. There is a really terrific book named that's called A History of God. I'm forgetting at the moment the name of the author, but it's called A History of God, and it traces how God has a bunch of different sides of God's personality has a lot of different sides to it, and depending on where what book of the Hebrew Bible you're reading, or even within the same book, it feels like uh, God is God can't simply be captured by one set of descriptors. So yeah, so I mean, I think to think of the idea of God, I mean, look, you know at a certain point we receive the book when we receive it. We read it when we read it, and it's fully formed. But perhaps it wasn't quite as fully formed all the time.
Sort of like the story of the blind men surrounding the elephant, and they're once touching the trunk, once touching a leg, once touching the tail, once touching the back, and they describe what they're experiencing,
Mhm.
but they're not experiencing the entirety of the elephant. They're talking about a part of it.
Oh, that reminds me. Yeah, exactly. I think Mary Linda mentioned this. What we were discussing the Shabbat when we were studying with and 13 petaled rose, and we had this sort of discussion of either a God evolving, sort of this uh, how God learns as God goes on and experiences God's creation, or on the other hand, when Will said, "Oh, that is related to relativity," I said, "Oh, but relativity, there's this absolute." So to think of actually God being absolute, but how we experience God, how we can relate to God, depends on our circumstances,
Mhm.
our environment, and what references we have, and that might also be again going back to having parallel Canaanite similar poems, psalms, uh, people immersed in this culture trying to express their understanding of God in an environment that they are familiar with.
Mm.
Marcus, did you finish chapter 6?
Yes, yeah, ethics or that is what it.
The
Mhm.
ethics.
I
We
got
finished
you.
up.
So
Well,
we don't understand the material, but we have great discussions.
this discussion's getting way above my pay grade if all these doctors and stuff and fluent Hebrew people, but I'm going to rabbi translation because I like it better.
No, and that's fine. That's fine. Listen, I mean, look, it's all it's all good, and that's I mean, I'm obviously very grateful to everybody for being able to comment on this, and I think we've unfolded a lot there. So yeah, um, and so one thing to note as we go through this, um, so for instance, the repetition, kind of leads to this, the repetition here leads to this very, poetic way of doing things. So for instance, if you go in the Hebrew from verse 1 to the beginning of verse 2, Havu ladonai b'nei elim, Havu ladonai kavod va'oz, Havu ladonai kavod shemo,
Mhm.
right? So we have Havu ladonai 3 different times. Now, it's what Alter says regarding the word havu, is which is translated here as ascribe. Um, what he says is that really it might be better to say even something to the effect of hail. Hail to God, divine beings. Hail to God, glory and strength. Hail to God, the glory of that name. And then Alter goes on to say the use of the whole phrase at the beginning of the psalm in a pattern of incremental repetition may be evidence of the antiquity of the poem, because incremental repetition is a device favored in the oldest stratum of biblical poetry. So what he's trying to argue is that this is a sign that this may have been one of the oldest of the psalms, one of the earliest. It's and he knows that because of other psalms that are dated toward earlier times that also use this very same method. So I wanted to know that. Now, uh, talking a little bit about this, going back to the idea of again, not necessarily being a pasting over of a Canaanite psalm, but inspired by or imitating to an extent certain Canaanite psalms, is the idea that in verse 3 that Kol Adonai al Hamayim, God's voice is over the waters. Alter comments, though the image is a naturalistic one of thunder, often imagined by the Hebrew poets as God's voice rumbling over the sea, The line registers a recollection of old Canaanite myths, in which creation is effected through the conquest of a primordial sea monster by the god who rules the land. In the incremental repetition here, the phrase the mighty waters has an especially mythological resonance in Hebrew. So, what are we talking about? God's voice being over the waters. Are we talking about this tradition, which I know I'm pretty sure I have referred to at different times in other psalms, of this battle before creation began of God against the against the sea monster, in which
Yeah,
God wins.
Tiamat, yeah.
Yeah, which I always picture that sea monster as being the Loch Ness monster. So I just because the photos we have, the supposed photos we have of the supposed Loch Ness monster is a sort of grainy, very blurry picture of something that I don't know, kind of resembles a brontosaurus of sorts. I don't know. And so I always kind of picture God going against this brontosaurus looking figure in the water. But you could also say that, voice being over the waters is another creation typology, which may be a reason why we sing this psalm on Shabbat, right? On a Saturday, on a Shabbat when we celebrate creation. What am I referring to specifically? I'm specifically referring to the second day of creation, in which the main order of business is God separating the waters. In other words, separating what became the Mayim, the water, and the Shamayim,
Heavens.
the heavens. So, the idea that God's voice sort of thundering, rumbling over the waters, um, could be any number of things. It could be this wrestling match with a sea monster. It could be rather a reference to how God is able to manipulate the early days of creation through God's own power. Speaking of power, let's see, Linda, could you do 4, 5, 6?
The voice of God is power. God's voice is majesty. God's voice breaks cedars. God shatters the cedars of Lebanon, making Lebanon skip like a calf, Syria like a young wild ox.
Thank you. Great. Okay. So, all right. So another bunch of repetitions, especially 3, 4, and 5. Kol Adonai al Hamayim. And then in 4, Kol Adonai Bakoach. And then in 5, Kol Adonai Shover Arazim. Okay. So we have that threefold repetition. And so God's voice is in power, in majesty, and breaking cedars, shattering the Lebanon cedars. When did Lebanon get into this? So Alter explains it better than I could when he writes, throughout biblical poetry, these trees, meaning the cedars of Lebanon, are the great emblem of proud loftiness. An excessive literalism has led some interpreters to see the mention of the northern mountains of Lebanon and Syria as evidence of Assyrian provenance for the poem. The place names appear equally in the late and distinctly un-Canaanite Song of Songs. Lebanon is not only a place of towering forests, but also the northern border of Israel. So, another example of how these cedars of Lebanon are the symbol of great might, you may recognize that, first of all, the flag of the nation of Lebanon has in the middle of it, I believe, a cedar tree. So it is a great, it is a great symbol of that region. you may also recall that in the construction of the first temple, which was, one of the most grand building built up to that point, as we understand it, King Solomon at one point makes friends and makes a business deal with the people of Lebanon, and and basically acquires a bunch of the cedars to be used in among the materials used for the building of the temple. So, in other words, Solomon trying to build this grand palace uses, it's like if you're gonna do it, you're gonna get the best, right? It's so what's the best kind of wood? It's the cedars of Lebanon. So bringing it to this idea that God is so powerful that God can shatter even the cedars of Lebanon. And like I said, we're gonna get references to the cedars of Lebanon at different points through the Hebrew Bible, and doing so much that Lebanon is going to skip like a calf. Let's see if this footnote says anything here. Yeah, makes them skip like a calf, Lebanon and Sirion.
What is
Sirion,
Syrian?
I think it is meant to be sort of a derivation of Syria.
Oh, okay. That would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help. I mean, maybe it's because I recently ate some steak that I'd cooked, that whenever I see Sirion in English, I
The
think for a moment
sirloin.
that is sirloin. So it's like, oh, maybe I was just hungry. Um, so, but and the psalmist uses this idea from time to time of making of doing so much, like being so powerful that the items, uh, that the parts of nature are basically acting like frightened little animals.
I don't know about frightened. I think they are excited that God
Okay,
is so powerful.
okay,
So,
sure. No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, but just sort of like, but I might say awestruck,
mhm,
perhaps.
good. Mm.
Yeah, and and then back to, we have another couple of Kol Adonai phrases in 7, 8, 9. Marcus, could you read for us 7, 8, 9, please?
Okay, 7. God's voice kindles flames of fire. God's voice convulses the wilderness. God convulses the wilderness of Kadesh. God's voice causes hinds to calve and strips forests bare, while in the divine temple all say, Glory.
Yeah, yeah. So it's so a couple things here. Uh, there. First of all, so I want to talk about verse 9 for a second here. Um, Kol Adonai Yecholel Ayalot Vayechasof Ye'arot. Okay, Ye'arot is in. There are some who will argue that Ye'arot, which is a way of saying forests, should be instead Ye'alot, which means gazelles, which might go along a little bit with the idea of, in verse 6 of Lebanon skipping like a calf. All right, so maybe it would make more sense that God would be talking about gazelles. However, um, but Alter doesn't think that that's particularly convincing. saying it is certainly possible to imagine the fearsome assault of lightning and thunder triggering birth pangs and also devastating the forests. The birth pangs referring to causes hinds to calve. So the overall idea you're getting in this psalm is that it is this overwhelming exaltation of God's incredible power. This, I think, is really the main thing. But I do want to also note that in the divine temple, Heichalo, what are we talking about here? Now, altar doesn't translate Heichalo as temple, translates itself instead as palace, because, as he writes, the context suggests God's celestial palace, where, while the earth roils in the storm below, everything bespeaks God's glory. The awesome power manifested on earth in thunder and lightning is celebrated ceremoniously on high in the divine palace, populated by angelic or quasi-divine courtiers, meaning, we're going to tie this back into the very first verse where we're talking about the B'nai Elim, right? This sort of divine court. In other words, to say that in the saying divine temple isn't necessarily wrong, but lest we think we're talking about the temple in Jerusalem, what we're speaking of is the divine temple. In other words, a temple that is closer to where those B'nai Elim actually are. So we've gone from God causing this remarkable display of nature on earth back to where God is, presumably in a high place above earth, and where God's audience is exclaiming how impressed they are and their exclamation of glory. So God is causing all these crazy things on earth, and meanwhile in God's divine palace, everyone's watching this with the appropriate amount of awe. So that, I think, is what we're trying to picture. Questions or thoughts before we do the last couple of verses?
Just a comment. When you were talking about the book, A History of God, it's Karen Armstrong.
Karen Armstrong. So, A History of God. Okay, so actually, that is a really good book.
Okay.
However, I'm actually speaking of a different book.
Okay.
This book is called God, a Biography.
Oh, no, that one I don't.
Right, which was written by something else. Don't get me wrong, Karen Armstrong is great, and The History of God is really good too. But I think I'm actually referring to God, a Biography. So thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. So we have here the conclusion of this, which is a little different, maybe. A little different. Gilia, could you do 10 and 11 for us to wrap it up?
Sure. God sat enthroned at the flood. God sits enthroned, ruler forever. May strength be granted to God's people. May God bless this people with well-being.
All right. So again, if our gaze is now at the divine temple, it follows that, all right, here's God enthroned at the flood. What kind of flood are we talking about? Alter says the mention of the primordial flood is a measure not only of the eternity of God's reign, but also of God's supreme dominion over the forces of nature. It is, of course, in a storm that the poet has imagined God's power in this psalm. Now,
So
yeah.
I mean, this whole thing also, I saw in 9, it says divine temple, but the word in Hebrew is hechal, which also means palace. It could, I mean, this already there you have this whole image of God's a throne room or
Sure, sure. Yeah, look at yeah, it's quite possible, and this is very much a you could say like a psalm of confidence or a psalm of royalty. Vayeshev Adonai Melech leolam at the end of verse 10. God sits enthroned, ruler forever. This last line kind of, uh, by the way, I love this last line, but it does feel a little off compared to what we've been talking about. Just with this wish of may strength be granted to God's people, may God bless this people with well-being. It just feels like a little
it,
parting statement. Yeah.
yeah, it seems a bit tacked on. I mean, up to verse 10, it's sort of all talking about God's majesty, God's power in the world, and God being in control of everything. And then it ends with this, oh yeah, and
Well, since God is so all powerful in the previous verses, it contrasts the fact that
yes,
we the people truly are weak, and we need God's help and God's
yeah.
support. We need the strength, we need the blessing, right? So that
I
we
mean, we have seen similar themes, I think, in other Psalms where, uh, I mean, sort of more personal ones, where the psalmist praises God and then says, "But please help me."
Mhm.
But
And
we have read in other Psalms through our studies, with, excuse me, with the rabbi, where it seems that the final verse has been tacked on,
Mm-hmm.
like brought from someplace else. And I got this, I got this verse. Where am I going to put it?
Yeah, and so the and indeed, Alter notes, yeah, this does feel tacked on. However, he does cite one potential connection, and this he attributes to a scholar named Yitzchak Avishur, who suggests the following. Remember, we talked about at the beginning, Havu Ladonai, like near the beginning. May may God give God give or grant. I'll so where it says ascribe to God, O divine beings. Havu Ladonai, we talked about it being maybe hail, but it also could be give or grant. Well, now we have a different word for give at the end at this last part at verse 11. So it's like, you know, give to God all the glory, etc. at the beginning of it. Now, God, as you've been granted or given all this incredible power, as you said, now give that strength and well-being, peace to all the people.
Yeah, mine says blesses people with peace. It doesn't say well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
shalom does mean
I,
peace. Yeah.
I almost see that I'm having trouble reading it because I had my eye treatment this afternoon. But God sits enthroned, ruler forever. That seems like a nice end conclusion.
Sure, sure. And it would have been, I would suggest that it would be perfectly reasonable to end, right there. So, this is um but I think it's whereas it feels kind of where it does feel like a little random. At least you can like there's at least is a little bit of an echo of another aspect of the poem in that final verse. So it's tacked on, but at least there's at least kind of there's a tenuous connection, perhaps.
Why did the translator translate Amo as this people? That's his people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's weird.
This is the Jewish Publication Society.
And
It
one
is.
says his people.
Yeah, it's 20 this is the 2023 edition,
Huh.
which they are trying to they're basically trying to avoid all
Uh-huh.
gender specific designations toward God. So
His people.
Okay, but then translate God's people. I mean,
Yeah, that's I agree.
yeah,
I
yeah, it does make more sense. I mean, I think it's look, it is clunkier, but it is more consistent. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, may strength be granted to God's people. May God bless God's people with well-being. I mean, that's a lot of good
yeah.
in one verse, but
No, I mean that is
but it is more accurate, no question.
Lord.
So no,
It just doesn't seem right to me.
yeah, no, I hear you, and no, you're the point is taken. I mean, no question. So
Because when the prayers we always say bless people with peace, we don't usually say well-being.
yeah, yeah, no, it's well-being as opposed, yeah, shalom.
it's shalom, which is complex.
Yeah, I mean, so
Yes.
no, it's right because and it also because it also kind of brings in the idea of shalem, shalem meaning sort of meaning sort of completeness as well. So yeah, shalom, shalem. I mean, this is our version of aloha, right? One of those words that seems to mean all these things.
Well-being just makes me think of health,
Sure. Yeah, no, it's true. It's I mean, it's a choice to say well-being as opposed to peace, but it's like, but I mean, I think it is.
Does Alter
It's
say
related.
peace? Does Alter say well-being?
Alter does say peace.
No.
This is a good sales pitch. Why you should learn Hebrew. Read it yourself instead of read somebody else's interpretation of it.
Sure. No, and that was a and that was something that often happened in or in my Bible classes in rabbinical school. That was the expectation that make your own translation based on your reading of it and your also reading of different commentaries that explain what they understand that those words to mean. So and when we would go over in class, we would translate things line by line. The notes, my notes were kind of all over the place. I think everybody's notes were all over the place because, the professor was always saying, yeah, well, it could mean this, it could mean that, it's possibly this, it's possibly that, because, again, it's important to remember we got, we received the text first, and then we get to try to figure out what's being said. So absolutely. So I appreciate you yet another very strong discussion, and I'm glad
Rabbi?
to have you. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Right.
God, a Biography
Yeah,
was written by Jack Miles.
Jack Miles. There you go.
And the interesting thing is that he won the Pulitzer Prize for biography or autobiography in 1996 for this volume.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
Good book.
Which is interesting because you have usually a biography is written about a person that everyone agrees actually exists.
Abraham Lincoln.
He wrote Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, exactly. Right.
I mean, it's like, yeah, but
a historical
interesting
figure.
that this book, an autobiography of God, won the Pulitzer.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So a very curious thing. So Yeah, no, but a really good book. So no question. Okay, well, I appreciate the strong discussion. We will go into the 30 somethings starting in 2 weeks. And let's see, and then lunch and learn Wednesday 11:30, Judaism 101 Sunday at 10 a.m. But we'll be both of them in person and on Zoom. So please, if you're available, love to see you, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Hey.
Take care. Have a good night.